All right, everyone. So I think at this point we have completely finished covalent molecules and we're moving on to ionic. And you've already started that by looking at the naming ionic compounds POGL. But just in case you didn't completely get it, we're going to go through some notes with this. We're then going to talk about writing formulas in the future, but for right now, let's talk about naming. So get back to our notes. If you look at your notes, the notes, we over here are on still on the first page. We're here for naming ionic compounds. I have written down here 4 examples. I'll just zoom in just a little bit so you can see those just a little bit better. So Li2O, K3N, NaCl, and Al2O3. At this point, if you haven't figured out, ionic compounds, when it comes to naming, is so easy, super easy, because ionic compounds, there's only one possible formula. So if you combine lithium and oxygen together, it will always be Li2O every single time. That was not true for covalent molecules. If you remember, you could combine nitrogen and oxygen in 2 different ways. So because of this, chemists get really lazy. Yeah, we're really lazy people. We don't want to write down ones because we're like, if there's just one, you just know there's one. There has to be at least one. So why would we bother writing it? Like, come on. Like, there's no one after the oxygen. We just know it. The same thing is true for the names of ionic compounds. We're really lazy. We know that there's only one possibility, so we're not going to bother throwing in all of these Latin prefixes. What's the point? That's ridiculous. You can just figure it out. So we don't. So when you're doing this, don't use Latin prefixes and just replace the "ide" at the end. That's it. So the fact that there's a 2 here means nothing. We already know that. Moving on. So we've got Li, which is lithium, and O, which is oxygen. Now, you'll notice these are on opposite sides of the periodic table, which makes sense because covalent or ionic molecules, or ionic compounds, sorry, not molecules, ionic compounds are made up of a metal and a nonmetal. So it makes sense that usually the first element is going to be on this side and the second element will be on this side. Oh, that's another important thing. That's actually a rule. You always put the cation before the anion. You put the metal before the nonmetal. You kind of like start from this side of the periodic table and then go across. So if we know that a compound has oxygen and lithium, we always start with whichever element is closer to this side of the periodic table. Lithium appears first, then oxygen. So that might help you out. So this is going to be lithium oxide. That's it. There's no monoxide, there's no dilithium, just lithium oxide. Super straightforward. Okay, next one. K3N. K is here, N is here. Potassium, nitrogen. Doesn't matter if there's a 3, it's just potassium nitride. The only thing we do here though, only thing we do change is the endings. That's still important. Okay, NaCl, sodium, and chlorine. So sodium chloride, that's all there is to it. Al2O3, does not matter that it's aluminum, that there's 2 aluminums for every 3 oxygens. Makes no difference to us. We don't care. Well, we do care, but we also just aren't really, there's no other option. That's all it could possibly be. It's going to be aluminum oxide. So I'm going to scroll those down just in case you couldn't see them earlier. Okay. So again, if you compare them to covalent, just immediately you can tell that sodium chloride is going to be ionic because there's no monos, there's no mono here. So even if there is just 1 sodium to 1 chlorine, if this were covalent, it'd have to be sodium monochloride, but it's not, it's just sodium chloride. You can tell that nitrogen monoxide, it has to be covalent because it has that mono. Okay, let me scroll this down just in case you couldn't see that. Okay, so that's the big difference. Ionics are super, super easy to write their names, to go from formulas to names. The next step is going from name to formula, which gets a little bit more complicated, but it's also kind of fun. It's like a puzzle. So we're going to come into that next time. But that's all you need to know for now. Be excellent to each other, and I'll catch you on the flip side.